Okay, so we're going to be working on these vessels. We already talked about PLA, the Revolve vessel, building out again roughly 120 millimeters by 100 millimeters width by height. We'll talk about the details. It's not going to be as specific. It's just like the previous project, much larger. It gets big, especially for what we're printing. But just don't want to make it too small. Anyway, let's look at what we're actually talking about. Examples. So a previous example, just something I've worked out. One, this is also demonstrating the appearance tool. It looks like shiny metal flake paint, and actually that is like stone or granite for the tray. But one of the things you can do is with the project having different components, or even just without it just being a single component, the default color, or rather the default material for any project in Fusion is going to be steel, that kind of semi-shiny gray looking thing you build out. You can toggle that to an auto color, which just helps and assigns a color to the components, not individual bodies, the entire components, and it just assigns a random color. So if you press and hold Shift and then press N, November, it switches over to auto assigned colors. I did not choose yellow and blue. It just selects a couple. Problem with that is sometimes it'll select nearly the same color for two different components, and it does get confusing, but that's just a thing. All right. So your basic form is going to be, again, this is separated into two components. You can see the little icon changed at the top of the project tree from the single block to the little symbol for stack of blocks, which means there's more than one component. And down here, each one of my components, the planter and the dish, has its own sketches, bodies, and origin. It's all built directly off the single virtual origin, so that's kind of irrelevant, but there we are. Good thing is I can isolate these by hiding one of the components, and you can see down below it has a evenly spaced amount of holes. You could make one hole. I would recommend making multiples just because you can. Also, that's a project is to use the actual Revolve tool or the Revolve pattern tool. Sorry, the Circle pattern tool to create multiples. So there you go. But they can be as big as small as you need. Obviously too large, and if you were actually going to fill this with soil, they would all just fall out. So I think these are 5 to 10 millimeters. I can't remember. We'll find out in a minute. But you can most certainly add more to this. I'm going to show you how. One of the things, they are separate components. A little dish has a little drip tray, that sort. But I have been playing. I altered this to where you can have additional features. So like you could use the circle pattern tool to create holes in the sides and such. If you, I don't know, want to make this an orchid pot. Or you could instead, and I just swap this into a couple of bodies here, may hide the one and replace the other. You can use different tools called the Emboss Tool, which I'll get into how to use, to create and basically, instead of just directly extrude, it extrudes either positive or negatively, so it pushes out or cuts in. Things like text and sketches and such along a curved form. Now, I will warn you now, the extrude tool has been drastically improved since it was introduced. Sorry, I keep saying extrude. I apologize. I meant emboss. It has been drastically improved since Fusion has introduced it into the program, but it still might be a little finicky. On too much of if the curved surface is too complex, it might not function at all, and we have workarounds for that. But just be aware that if you get an error, you're trying to emboss and it doesn't work, it's not necessarily something you are or are not doing. It can be a limitation of the program. There are ways around that, but we'll get to that. So those are just some of the options you could play with. So all right, where do we start? Well, on this, let me pull up the sketches. You're going to be starting with a basic profile. Like I said, you want to start with half of your profile, not the full cup, not like if you were in ceramics or something, or you took a laser and sliced a cup across, or if you had a saw, like most people might have instead of a laser, you would get a cross section of this thing. And I can actually show you one of the tools here. We'll use this later in the semester, but One of the things that allows you to see objects in cross section is the section analysis tool under inspect. It just literally takes a cross section of your form, and you can actually play with the depth. I just have it at 0 because it's across the plane. But from there, it shows you, like if you add half of the cup or half of the vessel here, we don't need half, we need a quarter. We only need half of the half. So let me get rid of the, where'd you go? There we go. Get back over here, go to just the sketch. So you're going to be creating half of the sketch, meaning part of the wall, we'll use the offset tool, or if you want to make your own other side, to create a width of about 3 to 5 millimeters. That helps. Like I said, thinner than that, it gets a little weak. Thicker than that, it gets just way too beefy. You can play around with different designs, cuts, stuff like that. Probably giving it some kind of a foot so you don't make a weeble wobble cup. But we can also play with some of that too. But it's pretty straightforward. You do the same thing for the dish. Oops. Why is it in? Oh. There we go. Sorry. Had to get the right combination. Basically, you do the exact same thing for the dish. Revolve Tool makes them. All right. So let's move on and actually build this. So first thing, save your project. Again, save your project. Make sure you have the right, you've already pulled up to the correct file folder. And this we have added. So now there is another one, Revolve Vessel. We'll click save and just title it something. In-class vessel, great. All right. Now, while you do not necessarily have to start by creating the different components, in a project like this, I like to just to help me not forget to do it later. You can drag and drop sketches and objects into their necessary components, but sometimes you forget which one you've activated and such, and they can just get a little messy. So what I like to do first is create the new components. Go over your toolbar, over assembly or assemble, and create new component. Same thing, it's very top at the drop down. Now you're going to get your little another toolbox come up. You can title this now. So we'll say planter. All right. Now, if you do that too fast, you'll notice that, yeah, it opens the project or opens a new component. Great. But it activates it. When I mouse over this, look at the little circle on the right of the component label. It's a circle with a little dot inside. If I mouse up to the top, just an empty circle. Activating a component isolates things. Or if you activate the entire project, the component at the very top of the tree, it activates the entire project. So it's a way to keep things isolated. Now I'm going to go ahead and make the other one. Make sure when you go to create your second one, you have not left just your new component active. Because if you do, new component, we'll just say test. Now you've made a component within the component. You want to avoid that. It's not a bad thing by any means. It's a way to just isolate things. But for the sake of this project, you don't want to do that. So let's Control-C that, get rid of it, activate the entire project. Now create a new component, because at the very bottom of the toolbox, it has a little checkbox, activate. If you deselect that, it won't automatically go into that. So, all right, we'll just say, not drip tray. So since I unchecked that box, it did not automatically activate that component. It stayed up at the top. Great. Okay. Now for the very first part, you could make sure to activate just the planter or not do the whole thing, because what I want to do is I want to create just a construction line sketch of my reference box. It just helps me know where the max boundaries are, meaning that I just want to be able to see what I'm working with, go from there. All right, so I'm going to start a sketch, and instead of on the XY plane, which is like you're working on a tabletop, I'm going to work on the XZ plane, which is like I'm working on an easel right in front of me. Select there, between the red and the blue, rotates over, great. Now, ordinarily, I would start with a center rectangle and say, all right, I want this thing to be, 120 by 100. But one, that's going to dip down below the x-axis. Not that that's a problem. It's there. So instead, I'm going to use a 2-point rectangle, which means you start at one corner, select the opposing corner, you're all set. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I'm making half. So half of 120, 60. So on the x-axis, 60 millimeters, tab over, that one, yeah, 100. Lock them in, great. Select all that. If you hadn't already, I'm going to change this to a construction line. So either go over to the the sketch palette box there, or just press X. Becomes a construction line. Okay, great, there we go. What that helps me do is it just helps me keep things in line. So I'm going to now activate the planter project, or the planter component. You could, like I said, if you decided, you know what, crap, I really wanted this sketch inside of here. All right, because it doesn't necessarily have to do with everything. You can drag and drop it in. You just have to drag it not underneath, but onto the actual table, or the actual title there, the label planter. Now that sketch is inside of the planter component. So there you go. So if you mess up, it's not the end of the world. You can drag and drop things too, but try to make sure you get your components, sketch object within the component you intend to. So it just keeps things a little more organized. As we get to make things more complex, that will just help you keep things organized. Okay. Second sketch. So I'm just going to label this to help. No, I clicked it too fast. Slow click. There it is. Wait, that's not how to spell that at all. There we go. Okay. New sketch, same place. I made that on a separate sketch, so I can, again, isolate that if I need to. There we go. Just helps. All right, so I'm going to use a fit point spline to just create half of a cup. You can play with this however you like. Basically, we're making something round, so don't make it a square. That's about it. So I'm going to start right at the origin point and just draw up. Now, you don't have to go all the way up. You could go below. You can go way in, out, anything like that. That's fine. You can play with the handlebars. You can drag this in and out, make this more of like a wide mouth vase or something like that. That's fine. Now, one thing, if I want this bottom to be an absolute bottom, maybe what I should do is drag this point upwards, or I'll have to trim things off. All right. So I like that. That's kind of fun. Maybe I'll make that a little bit looser, or sorry, a little bit wider. There we go. All right. Now I can make a second fit point spline, but if I want to keep the wall thickness consistent, I'm going to use the offset tool. Go to modify the line on the two curved lines next to each other. This just creates a copy of that first line at a distance, but it will modify that as needed. And I'll show you what I mean. Select the offset tool, select my sketch line. The further away I get, you see the smoother it gets, or the more it changes, because it bases that curvature off of its original line. It's not a direct copy, it's a modified copy at distance. So basically, it's taking, if you could imagine lines going directly perpendicular to this first line toward that other at a distance, the further away, the more likely they're going to converge. So that's really what that comes down to. I'm going to say, 3 millimeters. That works. Great. Okay. Now I need to close these. I need to close this sketch to create a closed sketch. So I can do a couple things. I can just use a straight line tool, zoom in, 1-to-1. There we go. And while I'm in here, do note that I'm drawing straight up in this case, well, it always bothers me because they display this axis as green, even though that is not the y-axis, that is the z-axis. It confuses you. But I am not going past that axis. If I do, it's going to do some weird things, and I'll show you what I mean in a minute. Go to the other side. I can draw this as a straight line also. Bonk, bonk. There we go. All right, closed line. We're all set. You don't have to keep that as a flat edge. I'll come back to it and show you different ways we can make that curved. But for now, that is the very, very, very basic idea here. You can, of course, change this around. You can drag these around because that is an offset line. Now it's going to follow along. That's why you want to use the offset tool here. It really helps with parametric modeling aspects. If you want to change things, using that offset line will allow things to move along with your first move or with your first line. Finish sketch and just show you what we need to do here. All right, that's a closed sketch. Great. Profile sketch. For this project, we're going to use the Revolve tool instead of Extrude. Extrude goes straight out. Revolve revolves around. And you don't necessarily have to create something directly on that axis. Just if you want to make it a closed form, it helps. Because if you make something away from it, like this picture shows, it's going to make it a hollow space. So let's select that. First thing, you're selecting your profile, the thing I just made. Selecting the axis, in this case, the Z-axis. Why is it? What's going on here? That's a first. Two profiles, cross them, revolve. Oh, I accidentally selected that first sketch. All right, what I did there, even though I specifically created this sketch to not go past, I did actually both. My line snapped to slightly to the side. That's frustrating. All right, fine. So we got to adjust a couple things. One, I wasn't trying to select this whole line up here, the sketch line. I was just trying to select the axis. I can deselect that by at least hiding that reference. There we go. But now if I go to select the Z-axis like I wanted to, it's going to give me that error. See, I'm trying to select just the origin axis there. Oh, that time it didn't give me the error. Interesting. But it's still going to make a funny little spot at the bottom because that line crossed over. You don't see it as clearly here, but it did. So if you don't get an error and there's no problems, then yeah, I guess there's no problems. But I'll show you how to fix that little bit right there. But there you go. That's how the Revolve tool works. It's extremely simple. Now, there's more that we're going to do to it, but it's an extremely simple tool. So let's just, for the sake of this part, select OK. All right. So one thing, let me go back. If you did get an error for that, what we can do to fix that, go back and edit, zoom way on in, and I can either draw a new line or I can see if this line lets me move over. There we go. Right. The reason that gave me that, reason that adjusted like that, let's see if it shifted everything else out. It was not because of my first line, my original line. It was because I was drawing across, or I was drawing and trying to match the offset line I created. The offset doesn't necessarily go perpendicular to that first part of that line. It kind of moves outward because this whole thing is curved. If this were a straight line and that I was using the offset, it would move directly perpendicular in a single direction. But because this is curved, it was moving kind of outward away from. So if I needed to, I could trim it, but it actually let me drag that around. That was pretty convenient, but you can see what's happening here. The dragging around is warping the whole thing. Woo! We don't want that. All right, let's Control Z a couple times, get back to where it was when I had that error, that teeny little shift there. Okay, so if you get that, not a problem. What you need to do, create a new line, and we'll just start above here on that axis and go down, zoom out, zoom in, zoom out, zoom in. There we go. Down to my origin point. It's gonna, computer's dragging a little bit because I'm zooming way in. There we go. Okay, that's a super teeny line. You hit escape, finish that. So now it's a little more prominent when I go all the way up here. Jeez, I was way zoomed in. All right, You see how now that I'm way zoomed in again, you can see just how far off that is. It's minuscule, but at this size or at this scale, it's not. So you trim those off. Use the trim tool, chop it away, and that little tail that I made originally, chop that away. Great. What? Why is there an error now? Oh, so I'm getting an error because when it recalculated, it was still calculating based off of that original sketch. So all that means is just go readjust the revolve, and we're just selecting the same profile now. It's just without that little tail. Again, axis, Z-axis, no errors this time. Great. Okay, so there we go. That is how to fix all that. Save and revolve. Okay, so we've got that detail. Now, what do we do to embellish this? One, to not make it a teeter-totter thing. Well, we're going to need some kind of a foot to this. This could be whatever you want to design it to. You could end up making individual little cauldron feet. You could make like a whole ring around it, stuff like that. Also, if you look at it from the front, that's a pretty sharp edge. What if I want to curve that around? Well, you got a couple of options. Let's tackle the lip up here first, just because we can play with those a little more quickly. You can use the built-in, as it is right now, use the Fillet tool. Now, you can select both of these edges individually and drag in until it meets, and you're going to get some weird stuff if you keep dragging in. It's actually chopping stuff away. That gives you an error. Okay. Well, what if I really want that to be actually a completely consistent curve around? I'm going to see if this works, because sometimes it's finicky. We have at the top of the toolbox the type fillet, of course. There's also a full round fillet where it automatically calculates how much fillet on either side to bring it to a smooth semicircle transition. So you select that, select just the edge. There we go. Now, perfect edge. That worked great. Okay. Now, the other options you could use is you could go back in that sketch and edit it to where, in this case, I could, let's see here. You know what? Actually, just to finish this, let's select this body. I'm going to copy and paste just to create a second one. Yeah, there we go. That way I can label these as different options. Okay. Full fillet lip. There we go. That's for that body. All right. So now I go back to this edit sketch. I don't know. It might actually mess that up. So deal with it if it does. Here, I could maybe use a fillet tool here and round those over. Now, the problem with this is, all right, well, I selected this one. Now, do I have to make a two different fillets? No. If you do not hit enter, you can select again any multiple more fillets, whether or not they're sharing that same shared line or not. But because you have not hit enter, they are all going to function at the same radius amount. So I can drag one. Now it's going to, okay, lied. That was a first. Huh. That has never happened before. I don't know why or how that's disconnected. That's interesting. Okay, well, whatever. You can totally do that. I don't know why it's disconnecting. That's strange. I've never had it happen. I've never had that happen before. Somehow were those not linked? I don't know. Tell you what, we'll just hit cancel on that. Good God, that's a new one. All right, so that should work for some reason. I don't know why that's not right there. Okay, let's try some different options. Other thing you could do is draw shapes built into that, meaning that you don't have to necessarily augment this sketch using any of the modifiers. You could actually draw an additional shape onto that. Like here, I could use a circle tool, and in this case, a 2-point circle. So rather than drawing out from the center, which technically would still work, but in this case, I'm going to use a 2-point circle, And I'm just going to use these two edges, these two corners, as my 2 points. There we go. Now, the difference being that this builds outward, whereas originally I would be using the fillets either ideally within the sketch or the finished body, and it would be modifying this edge and not going any further, where this version you're actually adding on to it. So if I hit finish sketch, now it's not going to change anything there, but if I go to the revolve, or tell you what, we'll actually use this to create a new body here. Let's bring up the revolve tool with that. So I'll hit revolve again, same profile, but this is actually fun. You can use the same because it's technically using that as an edited out part or as a break line. It's going to create, if I create the axis, or sorry, if I select the axis and create it just as is, it's going to create a lip with that little cutout. Kind of fun. But let's fix that profile, and I actually want to make sure I'm using both of those. Stop it. Yes, select a profile. Boop, boop. There we go. There we go. So essentially, you get the same result. Let's see, we'll just use that as the difference, just being that one is going to be slightly longer than the other because I've added to that sketch. So you can play with those however you want. You could even go back and make like an ellipse where it rolls outside of the lip, anything like that. There's all kinds of ways you can play with that. Anyway, we're going to use I'm just going to focus on just that full fillet lip, just because it's there. That worked nicely. Oops. And let's hide the sketch. Okay, great. So we got that. Well, I also would like to actually have this thing stand up. So let's add some feet to it. You can go back and modify the original sketch, or if you want, you can add a second sketch and then just join the two. For this case, it doesn't really matter. For the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to add a second sketch just so they can stay separated and you can see what we're doing. Now, you do want to work off the same original plane. I'm going to hide the body just so I can see what I'm doing here. And in this case, yeah, I could just make like some kind of profile, and we're going to revolve that too. So fit point spline again. Yeah, something like that. I don't know, some kind of, oops, wrong way. Some kind of doodle comes out. Sure. Main thing is I don't want this to cross back under any of these points, because if I'm going to print this, excuse me, if I'm going to print this, that can cause a problem. Not an error, just a problem. To there, good. What happened? Weird. Okay. There we go. If I need to modify this, whatever, but I'm not going to. Again, offset tool, just because it's convenient. Let's make that 3. Great. There we go. All right. Now, a couple problems here. That offset, see, is shorter. Not a problem at all, because I can use the modify, go to extend, and it's just going to move. It's just going to extend that line out to the next available lines, except if you have made this on 2 separate sketches. So this is why it is beneficial to build everything on the same sketch, because if you want it to interact with these, you need those. You need those sketch lines in the same sketch. There's ways around it. So when I hit escape, I'm going to use a projection. What I'm going to do is basically borrow a line from one sketch, or you can do this from another body if you want, and bring it onto this one. So I'm going to go down to create. Let's drop down, project include, project, or you can just hit P. Select that line. Okay, so now if I hide that original sketch, it's turned this purple line here. That is my projection line. Now it has borrowed an element, in this case, a line from that sketch, and plopped it onto this one. It's basically a kind of sort of copy and paste with a reference to the original. So if I go back and change the original line, it's going to change this line as well. So that's the difference between copy and paste. It's not making 2 separate entities. It's creating a duplicate entity that is still linked to the original. Now, if I go to modify, extend, works. Do the same thing down here. I would try to do that, but there's no break line for me to extend to. So before I do, use the line tool. Excuse me, I'm going to go straight out. Doesn't matter if I go too far. That's okay. Now I go to modify, extend, fills in the rest. Great. Trim off that little tail. And now I can, in this case, I could either use, what happened? Yeah, constraint change. I could use a fillet in this case. Let's hope that it doesn't freak out on me. There we are. I did not hit enter, so man, that's weird that it's reacting so strangely. Huh. I wonder if it has something to do with the offset. I've never had that issue before. So I guess since it's given me that problem, don't use it. Okay. We'll just select finish, just that little bit there. Going to use Revolve Tool and automatically assume that profile sketch because I still had it selected. Select my axis. Now I've made a little ring thing. Cool. Unhide the other body. There we go. Now, with it hidden, you see in the toolbox down here, you got your different options. You got, and I'm going to explain this, what these mean in a minute. You got partial, anything like extent like that, angle, 360, so it's all the way in the round. Operation, new body. If I hit OK, there we go. It's created a new body. I can label that as foot. If I unhide that, we're good. But with the cup form, the vessel form hidden, visible rather, go back to edit feature, it was going to automatically switch to join. You could do either, doesn't matter. But in this case, I don't want it to do that just yet because I want to show you something. What I could do, I could also use this revolve. I don't have to make it an entire piece. I can do like just a chunk. Let's say like 10 degrees because it's working off of degrees. All right. I made this little spot here. Cool. I could use this one and then I could use the pattern tool, go down to create, pattern, circle. I can select a body here. So just that little guy around an axis. And I could make like little cauldron feet. So it's neat. But one quick thing about this. All right, now I wanted to go and round all this stuff out and blah, blah, blah. Let the program do the work. Instead of making all the changes to each one of those individually, I'm going to make all the changes I need to one, then make a pattern of them. So in this case, go to fillet. Let's see here. Let's start first with, oh, cool. Made a full, oh, because I was still selected on full round. Let's not do that. I don't want a full round just yet. We'll just do a regular fillet. I'm going to select all the faces here. I can try to select the bottom too. Let's see if it'll let me do this. And just hit like one. All right, cool. The problem with selecting the entire face there is, see, it also rounded this up top. So that doesn't work for what I want to do. So if you get this kind of, it's not an error, but if you get this kind of result and that you didn't actually want these top to be curved, instead of selecting the faces, select just the edges. So it's a little more tedious to select all those edges, but essentially what it's avoiding, because when it's avoiding selecting also these upper edges. When you select a face, it's selecting all of the surrounding edges. When you're selecting just by edge, it's only going to work off of that edge. Down at the bottom, I can select the entire face because I want all four of these. All right, now hit like 1 millimeter fillet. There we go. Same thing, but it did not affect up here. I can keep going to see if I can get it kind of a close to full round. Let's see. Go to 2. 2 is too much. This is why I like using it numerically rather than selecting by slider, because it's way too easy to move way too much. And great, I've made a little French fry side. Okay, that's actually somewhat interesting, but not what I wanted. So somewhere between 1 and 2. So 1.5, a little bit too much. 1.2. All right, that works. Maybe 1.3. Okay, that seems about as close as we can get. All right, I made this little adorable little leg thing. Great. Okay, it's still its own body. Now go to create, pattern, circle tool, select that object, that body, select the axis. If you have trouble seeing it or selecting it when it's inside of a body, just hide it. There you go. Now, I've made 3. It's going to create these equidistant if you choose. Right now, I could add a lot more. 23. A little much, but hey, it works. You can also do this distribution-wise. Full, it's going to do everything equally spread out over 360. I can do partial, and then I can select the degrees. So if I wanted this, let's just say, yeah, let's leave it at 5. That seems more reasonable. 3 even. Use the slider. I can add more. Or where'd my degree slider go? I don't know, 90 degrees. So you could make them all on one side. This might end up being something useful later on if you wanted to make like fingers or something on something. Don't know. But in this case, I want full, and I don't know, let's make 7 just because odd numbers are fun. Okay, great. There we go. Let it calculate and save. Lots of feet. For the purpose of this project, honestly, I'd recommend probably making it one solid ring, but you get the idea. You can play with this quite a lot. Okay. Let's make some holes for the plant to breathe. I know that doesn't breathe through the dirt. All right. So I can start a new sketch. In this case, I do want it on the XY axis. If you have trouble getting at it, tumble your orbit underneath and select from the bottom. All right. Now, in this case, another situation of you might want some reference lines, some construction lines. The reason I say this is because you're now dealing with a representation of a curved surface, you don't actually have any like real points of reference to go beyond or anything. So in this case, obviously you can make use of these existing bodies here. So I'm going to create a center circle, but I'm going to use this as a construction line. So I'm going to start one right in the center here, and I'm just going to go out to, I don't know, something less than there, less than those feet. All right, 50 millimeters. All right, good. That just gives me a point of reference. Don't make the circles any bigger than that, or any bigger or beyond that. Okay, cool. So somewhere between 0 and 50. All right, so sure, 25. I don't know. That seems a little slight, so maybe 30 millimeters. Cool. All right, that seems about right. So that just gives me a point of reference and some intersecting lines that I can use to snap my other lines to. So let's use another center point circle, switch off of the construction line, and I'm just going to put one circle right there. Let's make that 5 millimeters. That seems reasonable. Okay, so yes, I can use the pattern tool to create multiples here. Again, why bother? Let's create as much of the features as we can in one and then make copies of the completed feature. Okay. So finish sketch, just that one little circle. Great. So it's floating down below. Okay. So now we're going to use the extrude tool for that. Obviously, that's that sketch, and just drag it straight up. Now your operation automatically goes to cut, but just for the sake of making it easier to work with sometimes, what if you decide, you know what, a couple things. One, what if I change my mind and I want this pot to be thicker or something? Instead of using the extent type by distance, let's go to object, just select the inside of my form. Now it's always going to make that cut extend all the way to the inside of that. If I make the thing thicker, won't be a problem. Great. Hit OK. Okay. Now let's just make some features to that, as in, why make it a straight line when I can make it curved? So let's select fillet. It's just fillet, not full round. Or we can try full round if you want, doesn't matter. But instead of selecting the edges, I want to select the inside of that basically like cylinder. Now there, I don't know, 1 millimeter. There you go. Just make it curved. Makes it a little bit easier to work with. Okay. Select OK. Now, technically, one drain hole would work, but let's make, for the sake of this project, let's make more. Also, we'll probably, because of how this thing is formed, I'll probably want to add one more right in the center. So I'll deal with that in a few, but just to finish what I'm talking about here. Now we go to create pattern, circle pattern, which by the by, if you haven't already, and if there's a tool you want to use more often, you can modify your toolbar. So clearly I'm using circle pattern a lot, not just for sketches, but also for solids. So this little ellipses, there's 3 dots that form or that show up when you mouse over a tool. Left click that, and you have some toolboxes or some selections. You can select by toolbar and by shortcuts, which we haven't gone over yet. Toolbar, all right, now it's part of my toolbar up there. Cool. I don't have to keep searching for this thing. When it says by search, we haven't gone over this yet either, but if you press S, it brings up your search bar. So if there's been a tool that you've been wanting to use, or you did use and I just don't remember where the heck it is, you can search by here, or this is also where you can plop other tools as well. So we'll reference that again later, but good time to bring that up. So now my circle pattern tool is up here and I don't have to go searching for it again. So before I've been selecting by bodies. In this case, if I select by body, I'm just going to get the whole thing because this whole thing is one solid body, not like the little feet here. But you can select by faces or by features. We're going to see if this whole feature works. You get it? There's that fly buzzing around, I know. Need to bring in a swatter. Yeah, great. I'm going to select by features. Now, hopefully, what features means is it's not just the individual faces, it's the entire function thing. So if I mouse over, I'm selecting for the most part. Good. So as I zoom in a little bit, you can see what I mean here. Let me switch over to by faces. You can see the difference. As I select by face, it's grabbing just one of those. In this case, you see the dividing line here, this edge. It's that whole kind of half donut thing. Great. Now I got to go and select there. Now I got to go and select there. Okay. But if I had switched to features, still not grabbing the whole thing, but just right here, it's selecting both of those fillets. And then I select the center there. It's not a big difference in this case, but if you have more complex features, it's a lot easier to select by feature. Okay, axis, back to the Z-axis. Lots of holes, probably too many in this case. Let's say 5. All right, now hit OK. Let the program do the work. Much, much easier to deal with. Okay, so for the most part, that is kind of a funky bowl or a planter, probably not that stable or that strong to print. One last thing, if I wanted to add a little bit more strength, because I really wanted to keep these little weird feet, but I do want to be a little stronger. Remember, when it comes to 3D printing, and this is really true of most any sculpting or machining and such like that, something that forms a tight right angle is not as strong as something that has a little bit of a curve to it right there. So I can go to select fillet. Let's see if it'll let me. Now I think I'm going to have to just select by each one. But if I select that edge, it's going to do some funky things because right now these are separate bodies. What I want to do first, join, go to the main body, and then I want to select all these little guys. So if I just go to one of the major views, so back here, because it doesn't matter because it's all circle, use a selection box, grab all of them. Now I can combine them back down to one body. All right. Now when I select fillet, let's see if it does it just with this. Cool. Because I was able to select just the whole body here because they're already joined. Now it adds a fillet to every one of these, and I didn't have to go and select every single one. So if you haven't caught on, a lot of the workflow decisions aren't necessarily just because that's a more efficient way of working. Calling it more efficient is really just saying, I'm kind of lazy and I'd rather this thing do more of the work than I have to. So, hey, whatever helps you speed up or just helps you work. I can keep adding to this. Let's say what a 5 millimeter fillet does. Ooh, that gets kind of funky, but actually I'm not opposed to that. It is stronger, that's for sure. But it just creates a better transition between two elements. That's all. So I'm going to leave it right there. Okay. So that is an admittedly funky planting vessel. Let me save there. Vessel Dion. Done. Maybe, I don't know. We're gonna add some more features to that. Okay, let's pause for a moment. All right. So I like what we did with the cut pot here. Like I said, I probably added a little more to the bottom there, maybe a center hole because that's kind of a low spot, but we'll deal with that in a bit. What I want to do is make the drip tray some sort of a basin for this. So what I can do here, let me collapse everything, and because I'm going to work on a separate component entirely, now I can activate a separate component. You deactivate one, and it leaves a ghost image there, so you can at least see what you were doing, or still see what's there. I'm going to show you how to project and copy that stuff if you need, but pretty much we're going to repeat what we did for the first one, essentially, to make the tray. So, start a new sketch. With this, if you want to build a bounding box, great. I just find it helps, especially for the top piece. I have that reference there, so I don't necessarily need it, but it's up to you. I'm going to start a new sketch, again, on the XZ plane, or XZ plane. And I'm going to create a half of a dish profile here. So because I want this to be flat, instead of starting with a fit point spline, I'm going to start with a flat line. So I'm going to start right here at the origin point because I know that the whole point is I was making sure to draw nothing below that. If you did, it's not a big deal. It's just more of that it helps to not go below that line because I can use that as a reference. If you did, doesn't matter. These don't have to touch. I can start work anywhere below this. It's just convenient to start there because I can size things to match. Okay, so I'm going to start a straight line, and I want to go at least slightly outside of the range of those feet. Okay, so that's about 35 millimeters. Cool. From there, I can either continue to go upward if I want to use a straight line. In this case, I do not. So we'll use there. I can use the offset line to draw downward, or I'll wait until I'm done. Hit cancel, go to fit point spline, and just pick up where I left off here. Start making a little bit of a tray. Most drip trays, you're going to want to make sure that it either goes slightly below or just not too far above where those holes would be, because the idea is you want the water to drain all the way to the bottom and not sit. So if it helps, I could draw a construction line, switch over to construction, and basically from where the top of that circle is, because that's the inside of my bowl. So if I'm having trouble selecting on it, and if I really want to have that, I'll use project tool, press P, and I can start selecting some elements in here. Now, it might be a little difficult to grab because there's so much going on, and it wants to only grab by the surface. So let's see if it'll let me orbit inside, and it won't. And let's see if it does some weird stuff. Ultimately, I think it's going to do some weird stuff. Can you see what's happening here? I'm not really being able to select the inside of those circles. So we'll just use the inside of that edge. So go orbit up. I'm selecting the inside profile of my form. Orbit back down. Select OK. Great. Now if I hit the planter, now I've got that line there. Very nice. That helps me a lot. So from there, I don't know. Construction line somewhere about there. Yeah, just draw straight out. Doesn't matter how long. I'm just using that as a reference. Switch off construction. Nope, not a regular line. I want a fit point spline. Start somewhere there and work your way out. Doesn't really matter where. Some sort of a sweep upwards. Okay, and again, if you want to leave the rest visible, that's fine. Now when I unhide that body, I can see, yeah, that the line I just made is kind of a little much. So let's just drag downward. Problem is, see, it has linked to that sketch line. So it's not a problem that it drags along. It's still just a reference line, but if I want to bring it down a little bit, that's fine. If you don't want that anymore, you should be able to hit unfix. Hit OK. Nah, it's still fixing. Right select, delete coincident. Now I can drag it independent of that line. So if you want to use that line, great. If not, doesn't matter. Like I said, I'm just kind of trying to make a reference point. So I want this to be more curved. There you go. If you were trying to keep this a really even sweep, I could have just made this a square line or a straight line and used the Fillet tool to smooth it out more so. So whatever works. The tray is more of, you want to keep the bottom of the tray flat, and the curve can be kind of whatever you want it to be. So, okay, got there. Use the offset again. Now I've got that double line. Oops. If I want to go outward, it's, in this case, it's -3. So going outward, there we go. Hit OK. And this time, just to show you the difference, I'm going to use a 2-point circle to draw between the 2 points there. There we go. Now I got a nice little curved top. I can trim out that chunk there. That works. And going to zoom into the center. Now remember, last time we ran into a problem doing this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a straight line. And instead of connecting to that point, I'm just going to draw it straight down. You can see that my the degree is at 90 degrees. That's what I want. Hit there. Oops, I didn't want to keep drawing. So now as I zoom in, let's just double check. Looks like, yeah, it looks like that point actually works. So it wasn't a problem, but just if your offset lines create problems, remember, just draw your connection line instead of directly to that point. Just go past it, and you can always trim off everything. Okay, this one's a lot more simple. Finish sketch. Go to Revolve. Select that profile. Select my axis, Z-axis. Whoop. There we go. Now I've got a snazzy little bowl. Okay. That's kind of all there is for that part. Hit save. Very done. All right. Now, for the assignment, one more thing we do need to make sure to do is add an appearance to this. So you can just press A to bring up the appearance tool, but I do need to shift back over to appearance mode, material mode. So press and hold shift, hit in, goes back to my material thing. So like I said, the default coloring is this kind of steel color. Now when I press A, brings up the toolbox for appearances. You can see all kinds of choices into different categories. Pick whatever you want, doesn't matter. They can be the same, they can be different. More power to you. This is just so you can experiment with how this works. If you open, let's see what liquid does. Cool. We can drag and drop onto the body. It look like calm sea water, apparently, if that's what that looks like, or a swimming pool. Great. Gonna have pee in it. If you see this arrow key next to it, all it means is that by default, the program has not downloaded those into your local library. So if you find one, let's switch like a metal, I don't know, chrome. Heck yeah. Super shiny. Just click them, it'll download. It should only take a moment to drag on. You just drag and drop it onto the body you wish to make chrome. Now, super shiny surfaces. You will see this reflection stuff. This is just left over from when they took the original photos of the materials. It was in clearly some kind of like hangar or warehouse. So you're just seeing the reflected surface of that original material. That's all. So you're not doing anything wrong or anything like that. I don't know, that one, sure, why not? We'll have a chrome bowl and a completely safe lead base. It's just kind of satiny. But yeah, play around with these, just see what they got. Like I said, heck, what you choose doesn't matter. Heck, even they got wood. There we go. Rich mahogany. Wooden base. Why not? Some of these, they do need to download to function properly. So no harm in like going through and clicking all of them if you just really feel like it, but you don't have to do all of them. Just know, like, if you're wanting something to look like it was like painted plastic, plastic refers to usually not painted, but like actual base material. So like ABS, what we just talked about before, There's not any selection for the actual filaments. So if you want it to look like a painted thing, you would go down to paint and select from there. They got glossy, so like, yeah, sure, we'll make it bright yellow, which kind of looks like the original, or they have metallic or metal flake. Make it like a little hot rod vessel. Oh, I haven't downloaded it. There we go. Now you'll see in up above, you'll see it start collecting all of these. Because I have drag and drop these onto the project, what it saves the appearances you have selected just for quick reference. So if you wanted to attach material, assign material to multiple bodies, multiple components within the project, if you had a much more complex project, you wouldn't have to keep going back and forth down your drop down list. It just saves all those. That's all. At the moment, we're just using by bodies components. You can technically assign appearances by faces. It just gets a little tedious. Let me show you what I mean, though. Let me zoom in. And if I select by face, I could actually select these individual faces and drag and drop onto these. Oh, gotta download it. You can pre-select them and drag onto that. But I missed, and it got everything. So kind of like an MS Paint thing going. So if you, for the sake of this project, I would just keep it as apply to by bodies and components, and that way you don't accidentally throw everything, throw a color all over it. But yeah, it's whatever you want. This is just simply just for you to play with the appearance tools. Okay, so playing about, save, appearances applied. Okay, so this is technically all you have to do for this project. I want to show you some of the other things you can do. So you saw in the example ways to like use the pattern tool to cut holes in the sides and such. If you want to like make this like an airy pot, like something for orchids or something. How to do that? You can create a new sketch. And actually, first, before I do that, let me select let me make a copy of this here. All right. We'll call this one the red fillet cup. And then I'm going to make a copy and paste. Yep, that's fine. Whoops. I had the whole project selected. So when I made that copy, it made the copy up here. So to avoid that, make sure you have actually activated the component you meant. And if I need to, I can just drag and drop that. But if I try drag and drop that in there, it's going to make a copy. So what I want to do instead is just to make these different, I'm going to bring up the appearance tool again, and I don't know, sure, metallic yellow, whatever. Ugh, that's like metallic mustard. We'll go to white. Oh, crud. It was selecting both of them and changing the two different ones. All right, got the red one. Why is that clear now? Ooh, I think my program's getting confused. And it's showing it as clear instead of something solid. That's interesting. Okay, well, we'll deal with it. Anyway, we'll say that one is yellow. Okay, now I can drag this, drop it into the bodies. There we go. Oh, it's because I didn't have the component link or component active. That's why. All right. Anyway, I just want to be able to show you just so I can keep some things separate. All right. Yellow cup. I'm going to work on this one. Create a new sketch on the XZ plane. And in this case, I could do circles, or I could even do like doodles. So something, I don't know, And I could make that. I could play with this, tweak it around, make it kind of this kind of like violin shape. I don't know, just throwing something out. Okay, and let's make that a complete thing. Let's mirror it. There we go. Mirror line. Will it let me select the axis line? It will not. Crud. So I got to create a line. I don't know, just somewhere across. I'll make that a construction line so it doesn't get in the way. And now use mirror. Select to there. Select my mirror line. There we go. So now I have a closed sketch. All right, finish sketch. Now I can extrude that outward, and it chops a hole in the side. Or again, if I wanted to, if I planned on possibly changing this thing around, distance to object, so it cuts the outside, no problem. Okay. Yes, I could select symmetric, and it'll just go to both sides, same diff, but just for the sake of this, I'm just going to leave it as one side. All right. Now, of course, weird thing is because I selected that, it kind of messed with my distance. There you go. To object, make sure it cuts all the way through. Or you just drag it further out. Okay. Automatically cuts. Great. Again, if I want to make this curved, and let me select both insides there. And I don't know, probably 1 millimeter. That might be too much. Okay. One quick thing here. Because it had kind of a corner lip at the bottom, it's going to create this kind of odd thing here. If you wanted to avoid that, all you need to do is instead, before you make that fillet, actually adjust those corners there. Bless you. Now I just kind of rounded that out a little bit. I get like fits. I get fits of those, and I just get into like a sneezing attack. There you go. So whatever. This is just showing you how you can adjust those. Oh, great. Now I got like a Mr. Peanut thing going. Cool. All right. Mr. Peanut pot. Okay. Select now the inside. Make it like a 1 millimeter curve. That's fine. Okay. Again, circle pattern tool. I want to select by feature. Select that whole inside. Make sure I've got everything selected. So if it didn't also grab that inside edge, make sure you've got that. And see, it skipped those as well. So when you do this, something like this, make sure or certain that you've gotten everything. Now by axis, I select the Z axis, and there we go. Now I've made a variety of holes in the side. So now this is, oh, did it crash? Nope. Strangely, sometimes I have found recently that as I complete an action, Fusion it kicks me over to a different screen. So like y'all just see, not on the video, but like here, it just kicked me over to Google Chrome. I don't know why. That's kind of a strange thing it's been doing. So, all right. So that's how to create multiple holes, repeated holes on the sides and such. So let's save there. It's a holy vessel. Okay. All right. So we got that one. Cool. That's one way. What if you want to add some text and stuff like that on the sides, or just some features and actually make it like protrude outward? So we had that one, and we'll make the changes on this red fillet cup. Same deal. All right. Same thing. Create a sketch. And from here, let's build right on the front here. So whatever, I could create, let's see here. Actually, we'll probably use that same kind of doodle, but let's just do something different-y. Just going to kind of create some kind of line. All right. Going to use an offset tool. Let's make that, I don't know, 6 millimeters wide. Sure. And let's curve those sides. So let's use a 2-point circle to connect those. And just so you can see a little bit more clearly what I'm doing here, I'm just creating a sketch that just happens to traverse the Z-axis, even though it's showing up green. So let's trim those parts out. Okay. Finish sketch. Now, I'm going to see if this works, because sometimes one of the things about I'm going to use the Emboss tool, but sometimes the sketch needs to be outside of the object. So we're going to see how this works, if this works this way. Like I said, they've been continually improving the Emboss tool, but there's still some things that it either won't do or is required. So under Create, a drop down, you have the Emboss tool. Essentially, what it means is it's raising or recess, meaning it's cutting into the sketch profile, but relative to the actual surface. So unlike an extrude, which is just a rectangular direct extrude, this is kind of the same thing, only it follows the curvature of the body surface you're using. So choose Emboss, sketch profile, the vet, faces, the outside. So because it's floating on the inside, it is embossing on the inside of the form. So, all right, that's kind of what I expected to happen. So I'll show you how to fix that. All right, so let's cancel that. What I have to do is create a sketch floating outside. So what I need is a construction plane. If I mouse over to the more right side of my toolbars, it's the top one here, construction plane. It just simply creates a new virtual plane based off of an existing plane, or you can create one. We'll get into that stuff later. Just floating a distance away from the originating plane. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to select the same plane I was just working on, the XZ plane, and just drag it outward, forward, which in this case is about 100 millimeters and negative for whatever reason. Okay. And yes, I technically could possibly drag that sketch forward just instead of copying and pasting, but just to ensure that it works properly, I'm going to create a sketch here. But I don't want to have to draw a new one. So let's go back to that previous sketch. Edit sketch. I'll hide this body so I can see what I'm doing. Select all of those. Copy. Finish sketch. And now start a new sketch on this new construction plane, and you'll see what happens here. You see how this plane now is floating well above where I was working. So it's just a plane that is forward from the original one. Cool. So paste onto here. Now it's floating up there. Great. That's what I need. So let's hide this one. Don't want to deal with that. Okay. Unhide the red cup at the moment. Now we'll go back and use the Emboss tool. Select that sketch, little worm thing, onto the surface of this pot. Calculate. There you go. It is now embossed on the surface of that. You can, of course, select the depth. So go 5 or 10 or something like that. But something I want to show you on this, let me emboss it way more than it needs. Emboss works kind of like the offset tool. You see how it's not straight out in any direction? It's curved. It actually tapers ever so slightly, and the further out it is, the more it tapers. So, and that taper occurs relative to the curvature of the surface. So up here, it's curving slightly down. Below, it seems to be curving slightly outward. That's because the bottom of that vessel rounds down. So just know that if it kind of does some funky things, it's because of where you've placed it on the vessel and how curved it is. You can play with this orientation as well. You can rotate to some degree. Do too much, and it'll mess with it. But you can actually rotate it away from how the sketch originally was. See, now it's curved side to side. You can actually drag this around the surface a little bit. Let's see how far I can push this. And the cool thing is look, it's not a direct projection off that surface. It continues to move around the surface. So you can actually sketch everything there and plop it in and drag it around if you want. I find it easier to just actually work how I want to place it and then go from there. But you can do this sort of things. So let's shrink that back down to like 2 millimeters. And I can also switch to deboss, which is just cutting in. So it just cuts into the surface, that's all. So it's a neat feature. Kind of got like, now it's got like a weird like Mr. Kool-Aid squiggly smiley face thing going, or it's a very confused Mr. Kool-Aid. I don't know. Just some features. Neato. Hit OK. Now, if you were to print this, this project would definitely require scaffolding supports. But I can kind of minimize some of that with one thing, like I can put a fillet on this edge here and kind of round this out a little bit. Let's try that. Let's fillet just that edge. The thing is a 2mm emboss, so let's try 1mm. You can see that it curves the surface up to half. So if I want, I could either continue that, maybe make that 2 full millimeters. Not going to let me. Okay, so let's just go back to 1. And you can actually make multiple fillet commands within the same tool. You see this plus and X tool or sign down here? You can add more to the same command, so you don't have to have like 50 different fillets commands on your history slider here. I hit one more, and I want to fillet right here. Let's try 1. Let's see if it blends the two. Yeah. So since it was a 2mm emboss, I did 1 fillet 1mm that is curving to the surface or to the rest of the surface, and then I did another 1mm fillet that curves to the surface of the emboss there. And yeah, it just curves it around. So just ways you can combine multiple features and make them function a little bit better. There you go. All right. It's got a weird squiggly point there. Neat. Other thing is I could, let's create a, on the same sketch? Yeah, sure. Let's create another sketch on that same construction plane. Now it does hide it, so you have to go back, and it creates a new folder, a new drop-down folder here. Construction, hides the plane again, and start there. And I just want to show you just adding text. So with this, I have to create a text box, and we'll try to make it centered about there. Sure. Yeah, plan. You can, of course, align things center and center however you want. Bold font's going to help. I don't know. Play around with some other stuff if you want. Make it fancy. 1 plant, please. There you go. Okay. And I can, let's finish that sketch. I can again emboss, select that sketch, select the surface. There we go. So obviously if that was larger font or so, that would be a bit more significant, but of course I got to pause while it calculates. Hey, did it? See, it keeps doing it. I don't know why it does that. There we go. So now emboss works pretty well. Used to, you could only emboss things on a standard geometric curved surface, like a cylinder or a sphere or something like that. It would not function on one of these generated surfaces. So yeah, they've vastly improved the emboss tool. Same thing goes if you wanted to add something on like the tray. You could do obviously something similar. We'll do the same. Create a construction plane off of there, drag it outward. Yeah, -80, sure, whatever. Cool, there we go. And we'll create a sketch on that plane. Make more here. Repeat. I don't know, just throwing stuff out there. And I'm just orbiting around so you can see more clearly. Hit the emboss tool again, sketch profile, faces around there. Default setting is just 2 millimeters, so you can obviously change that around. There you go. Fun. I don't know why it's doing that. Now, one thing though is if you go to print this, this is an overhang. So you will need scaffolding for something like this, because if it tries to print, you have these points just hanging down in space. You can minimize those by fillets again. Let's just experiment with that. I want to see what happens. Selecting the whole body. Well, let's try 1 millimeter fillet. Certain texts, yep, see, error, won't let me do it because that is much too complex. Let's try something slightly smaller, 0.5 maybe. Still going to cause errors, 0.3. Yeah, it's going to keep causing errors. So certain fonts and such just create too complex a geometry for it to create. So if you really want to put fillets on stuff like that, I would recommend choose or just playing with different texts, or let's edit the feature for the emboss, and instead, I don't know, let's deboss. Now it cuts inward. Doesn't really change a lot. It's still gonna need supports to print, but I don't know, it's in there now. So yeah, play around with these features. These are just I wasn't going to make this a requirement because I wasn't sure how powerful the Emboss tool had really gotten until I'm just experimenting. So feel free to play around. Main things are it does need a tray. It does need holes at the bottom. It will need some kind of a foot so it can keep the planter from toppling over. And you might need some space. You might need some holes for water to get out from underneath that too. You can add features to the sides if you like. You can add text to the sides if you like. You can add both. Totally up to you. Main thing is it does need to consist of. That's getting confusing when you have multiple objects taking up the same space. It does need to consist of 2 separate components that have the features of drip tray that seems functional enough. It's like a shallow bowl. Some kind of a vessel that is roughly, or at least at max, about 120 millimeters wide by 100 millimeters tall. Smaller is fine, a little bit bigger is fine, but try to keep no bigger than that because that seems small, but that gets real big on the printer. Some kind of feet so it doesn't topple. Unless you just want to be that person, then yeah, plants, and then falls over. It's up to you. Gotta have drain holes. And you have to apply some sort of appearance, whatever you want. They could both be the same if you really want. We're just experimenting with that part. So yeah, play around with it. Just explore what it can do. You don't have to have those features, but it is fun to have stuff that because you can, I don't know, put your name on it, what you plan to plant in it. If you expect that it's going to die, put dead plant, whatever. All right. Experiment, play, enjoy.